You don't perform an autopsy on a living patient.
No. No, you definitely don't.
I mean, it defies logic. It defies medical science. You check the pulse. You listen for breathing.
Right.
You look for a heartbeat. But in the year 2000, the global media establishment basically gathered around an entire continent.
They did.
They looked down at the patient, they pulled the sheet over its face, and they just declared it dead.
They absolutely did. I mean, it was a unanimous verdict from the financial elite.
Yeah.
The narrative was just cemented in stone. The continent was beyond saving.
I remember the cover of The Economist magazine from that exact year.
Yeah.
We are talking about like the most respected financial publication on earth.
Oh, absolutely. The authority on global markets.
And the headline was devastating.
Yeah.
Just absolute certainty. It literally just said, the hopeless continent.
Yeah. That cover is infamous.
They painted the shape of Africa black, overlaid a guy with a rocket launcher, and just wrote it off. Completely dismissed.
Like it was just a tragic, permanent charity case.
Exactly. But that cover became the defining image of a generation's foreign policy.
It was conventional wisdom. Every policymaker, every investor, every academic believed it. But there was, well, a catastrophic flaw in that autopsy.
Because the patient was waking up.
Yes.
The sheet was being thrown off.
Patient was getting up off the table and walking out of the hospital.
Right.
While the experts were busy writing these, eloquent obituaries, a secret explosive economic boom quietly ignited.
Right under their noses.
Right under their noses.
So let's get right into this, because this isn't just some slight miscalculation by a few out-of-touch bankers.
No, not at all.
The world entirely misjudged a landmass of over 1 billion people. We are talking about a paradigm shift that forces you to question every official narrative you read.
Every single one.
Poverty across this continent didn't just tick down over the next 10 years. It collapsed.
It really did.
The share of human beings living on less than $1.25 a day plummeted. It dropped from 58% in the year 2000 down to 48% in 2010.
10 percentage points.
Yeah.
That is a staggering plunge. I mean, it is a seismic shift in human history happening in the blink of an eye.
10 percentage points equals tens of millions of human lives. Tens of millions of people crossing the line from crushing, empty-stomach destitution into a totally new reality.
Exactly.
They were buying zinc roofs instead of thatch.
Yeah.
They were buying bicycles.
Putting their kids in school.
Yes, and nobody in London or New York saw it coming. The global establishment was totally blind.
They were blind because, well, they were staring at the wrong ledgers. They were trusting instruments that were fundamentally broken.
Which brings us to the core mission of today's deep dive. We are going to decrypt the underlying economic code of this historic turnaround.
We are going to find out exactly how the experts got it so terribly wrong.
And we are going to use a brilliant piece of forensic detective work to do it.
We are dissecting a working paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research.
Paper number 20-077.
Right. The title is simple. What is driving the African growth miracle?
And the decoders behind this research are Margaret S. McMillan and Kenneth Harttgen.
They are an economic forensic team. McMillan is from Tufts University. Harttgen is from ETH Zurich.
What fascinates me about McMillan and Harttgen is their sheer defiance.
Oh, yeah.
They looked at the official story and they rejected it. They didn't trust the pristine government spreadsheets.
Because official government ledgers in developing economies are often, well, fiction.
Right.
They are noisy, they are built on outdated baseline years, they are sometimes manipulated for political gain.
So McMillan and Harttgen threw out the bad x-rays. They didn't just tweak the math. They cross-referenced half a century of macroeconomic data.
And then they brought out a microscope.
A massive one.
They looked at over 1 million micro-level household surveys to find the grit, the dirt, and the absolute truth.
They walked away from the ministries of finance.
Right. They went into the living rooms, they looked at what actual human beings were doing to survive, what they were buying in the local markets.
Where they were sweating to earn their daily bread.
Exactly.
But I need to stop you right here. I have to push back. I am struggling to buy this premise.
Okay, hit me.
If this consumption boom was so undeniable, if tens of millions of people were genuinely escaping extreme poverty, how on earth did the global financial establishment miss it?
It sounds impossible, I know.
You cannot hide an economic boom of that magnitude. It's like hiding a supernova.
You can hide a supernova if your telescope has the lens cap left on it.
Oh, wow.
You can hide a boom if your instruments are fundamentally incapable of measuring it.
Okay, so think about this, you listening.
Yeah.
Have you ever looked at official statistics on the news, maybe inflation numbers or unemployment, and thought, this just doesn't match the reality of my grocery bill?
We've all been there.
Have you ever felt that deep disconnect in your gut? Well, today, we prove why your gut instinct is right. The official numbers for Africa in the 2000s were a statistical lie.
A structural illusion. Let's drop the raw data right here.
Let's do it.
During this period, the official national accounts reported a deeply depressing narrative. They told the world that these economies were barely limping along.
A pitiful 0.9% to 1.1% annual growth.
Basically flatlining. Statistically dead.
Right.
That is the heartbeat the World Bank saw. That is the flatline the IMF saw. That is the chart the economists printed. But the real consumption on the street level was existing in a totally different universe.
Totally different.
The real physical consumption of young Africans was skyrocketing. It was growing at 3.4% to 3.7% every single year.
Okay, pause. Let that sink in.
Yeah.
The official papers stamped by bureaucrats said 1%. The physical reality of food eaten, clothes worn, and goods purchased was 3.5%.
Yeah.
A massive, invisible, threefold increase vanished into thin air. It just
Yeah.
didn't exist on paper.
3 to 4 times the reported growth. It was a phantom boom to the economists, but it was incredibly real to the woman selling tomatoes.
Real to the young man starting a transport gig.
Exactly.
But how does that happen? How does a government simply lose track of 3 times its actual growth?
Because the growth was happening in the shadows. It was happening in the informal sector.
Oh.
If you build a house out of cement blocks you bought with cash and you hire your cousin to lay the bricks, the GDP accountant sitting in an air-conditioned office in the Capitol never sees
The
it.
tax receipt is generated.
None. No corporate ledger is updated. But the cement was bought, the cousin was paid, the house stands, the wealth exists.
Okay, so the wealth was real but invisible. That answers the what. Now we need the how.
Right.
How does a trapped, impoverished country actually flip the board? How does a supposedly hopeless continent suddenly generate a hidden explosion in wealth?
To understand the miracle of the escape, you first have to understand the mechanics of the trap. We have to look at a Nobel Prize-winning theory.
Here's where the underlying code gets fascinating. We are jumping back to the year 1979.
1979. The Nobel Prize in Economics is awarded to Theodore Schultz and Arthur Lewis. They cracked the fundamental physics of extreme poverty.
The root of extreme poverty is not a lack of natural resources. It is not a curse. It is not bad weather.
No.
The root of extreme poverty is low productivity farming.
It is the trap of the field. Imagine swinging a heavy hoe into dry dirt, working from before the sun comes up until after it goes down.
Exhausting.
And your physical labor produces barely enough calories to keep your own heart beating, let alone anything extra to sell.
Is the ultimate economic dead end. You are a human engine running at maximum capacity just to idle.
Schultz and Lewis proved mathematically that the only escape velocity from this poverty is spatial.
Spatial, meaning movement.
Yes. You cannot just try to work harder in the dirt. There are only so many hours in a day. You have to move. You have to physically transport human bodies across space.
From the farm to the city.
From the isolated field to the connected factory. From an environment of low productivity to an environment of high productivity.
So the African miracle wasn't magic. It wasn't the result of foreign aid suddenly working perfectly after decades of failure. It was a violent, massive, spatial reorganization of human labor.
People physically packing up their few belongings and leaving the dirt behind.
Wow.
It was a demographic earthquake, millions of feet walking away from the agrarian past.
And this brings us to an incredibly pervasive myth, a common sense belief about Africa that we need to subvert right now.
Prepare for a face slap, a total paradigm shift in how you view the global economy.
People in the West look at Africa and they assume the economic machinery there is uniquely broken. They think the continent is permanently off track.
Right.
They believe it defies the normal laws of global economic gravity.
That is false. That is mathematically demonstrably false. The data reveals a stunning, almost beautiful truth. When you control for per capita income, Africa's labor shift perfectly matches the rest of the world.
Wait, perfectly.
It is seamless. It tracks the exact historical evolution of the entire globe over the last 60 years.
Africa isn't broken.
Mm.
It isn't a unique failure of human development. It is following the exact same mathematical curve.
It is just riding that curve at a different point in time.
Right.
Think about it like a GPS route. If you look at Latin America's journey in the past, if you look at East Asia's journey in the past, if you map their employment shares against their income levels,
Okay.
and then you plot Africa's recent data on that exact same graph, the African dots don't scatter randomly. They fall perfectly, precisely on the historical line.
It is a mathematical inevitability. The people in these countries are doing exactly what Europe did during the Industrial Revolution, exactly what America did when people left the farms for Chicago and Detroit.
They are stepping across the efficiency chasm.
The efficiency chasm. I want to visualize this because the numbers are hard to wrap your head around.
No, it is.
Imagine stepping over a line drawn in the dirt. You take one physical step, just one single stride, and your economic value to the world instantly doubles.
Or triples.
Your labor is suddenly worth exponentially more just because of where you are standing. That is the chasm.
The raw data on this chasm is staggering.
Yeah.
McMillan and Harttgen measured labor productivity across 9 different sectors of the economy.
Okay.
Agriculture in Africa sits at a pitiful 36% of average economic productivity. 36%.
Ouch.
It is a heavy lead anchor dragging the entire macroeconomy down into the mud.
You are sweating in the blazing sun for 12 hours, and you are producing a third of the value that a normal worker produces. It is a mathematical prison.
But look across the chasm. Look at manufacturing. Manufacturing productivity on the continent is 6 times higher than agriculture. 6 times.
So the moment a farmer drops the hoe, the very second they step onto a factory floor and learn to operate a basic machine, their economic output explodes by 600%.
And it gets far more extreme than that. The mining sector is nearly 60 times higher. 60 times the value creation.
That is the line in the dirt. The moment a human being leaves the 36% zone and enters the 600% zone, a localized miracle happens.
Yes.
And when millions of people do it at the same time, the entire continent's gross domestic product gets a jolt of high-voltage electricity.
But here's the tragic part of the story. The dark context that explains why everyone thought the continent was dead. For a very long time, that movement of bodies was happening in reverse.
The historical reversal.
We have to look at the historical reversal.
The 1990s, the lost decade.
The 1990s were pure economic poison for the continent. Structural change, this critical movement of bodies across space toward higher efficiency, was actually happening in the wrong direction. People were leaving higher productivity jobs in the cities and migrating backward to the subsistence farm.
Or they were tumbling out of factories and into the lowest tier informal street vending.
Exactly.
Wait, why would anyone willingly walk backward across the efficiency chasm? Why leave a factory to go back to starving on a farm?
Because they were forced to at gunpoint, essentially, economic gunpoint. The 90s were the era of crippling debt crises. International lenders stepped in and imposed brutal structural adjustment programs.
Right, the SAPs.
They demanded that governments/budgets fire public sector workers and privatize state-owned industries overnight.
So the factories literally closed. The state-run textile mills shut their doors.
Exactly. The urban jobs vanished. And without a social safety net, unemployed urban workers had only one choice to avoid starvation.
Retreat to the ancestral village.
Go back to the farm.
So structural change wasn't just stalling. It was actively dragging efficiency down. It was a negative, destructive force.
In the 1990s, this backward structural change caused overall labor productivity growth to turn negative. The core machinery of the economy was running in reverse gear. The patient was indeed dying on the table.
But then came the turning of the millennium. The year 2000. Everything flipped.
The gears suddenly caught.
The machine violently jerked forward.
It transformed from a poison into an engine. Post-2000, structural change suddenly turned positive.
Wow.
It began contributing a massive 1 full percentage point to labor productivity growth across the continent.
1 percentage point might sound like a rounding error to a layperson, but in the world of macroeconomic growth rates, that is a roaring turbine.
Oh, absolutely.
That is the explicit difference between endless stagnation and an economic miracle.
It was so powerful that it made Africa's productivity growth second only to Asia during that specific decade.
Which leads us directly to the most obvious question, the farmland drain. If millions of people were crossing the chasm, where did all these farmers actually go? We were talking about a 10.6 percentage point plummet in the share of labor in agriculture.
Huge numbers.
10.6% of the entire workforce abandoned the fields between the year 2000 and 2010. That is an exodus of biblical proportions.
It is a human tide moving away from the soil, a demographic flood. But where did the floodwaters pool? This is where the African miracle diverges entirely from the established textbook.
Because if you read the standard economic playbook, it's one written by Britain, the US, and China, those farmers are supposed to go to factories.
Right.
They're supposed to ignite the next great industrial revolution. They're supposed to be sewing garments and assembling electronics.
That is the famous East Asian model. You move the peasant from the rice paddy to the garment sweatshop, you build massive export zones, you manufacture physical goods.
Yeah.
But in Africa, the manufacturing employment share only grew by a microscopic 2.15 percentage points.
2%. That is practically static. That is definitely not an industrial revolution.
No. The explosion happened entirely elsewhere. The service sector exploded by 8.23 percentage points.
So what does this actually mean? Is the textbook wrong? Or is Africa writing a completely unprecedented chapter in global economics?
Let's compare the diverging paths. Africa versus East Asia. Both regions experienced a massive structural exodus from the farm.
Okay.
Both regions moved their populations to increase human efficiency, but the final destinations were entirely different.
I am stuck on this. Isn't the classic manufacturing playbook the only historically proven way to build a middle class?
That's what we were taught.
You build millions of factories.
Yeah.
You export cheap plastic goods and textiles to the West. That is what China did. That is what Vietnam did. That is what South Korea did.
And that is the terrifying, unprecedented difference here. East Asia's manufacturing share of employment is double what Africa's is today. Africa essentially skipped the Industrial Revolution entirely.
They bypassed the smokestacks. They vaulted right over the assembly lines and the conveyor belts.
They jumped straight from the hoe in the dirt to the service sector desk. Or, to paint a more accurate picture, from the dirt to the informal retail stall, the motorcycle taxi gig, the mobile phone repair shop.
This is a wild realization, but I have a major problem here. We already established earlier that governments lie. We established that the macro ledgers are flawed, outdated, and blind to the informal sector.
Right.
So why should we trust these new numbers? How do we know this service sector explosion isn't just another statistical mirage?
Because McMillan and Harttgen didn't trust the macro ledgers to prove this either. They went to the micro truth.
The microscope.
They used a 1 million sample microscope.
You're talking about the demographic and health surveys, the DHS.
Yes. This is the absolute gold standard of ground-level, irrefutable truth enveloping economics.
Real low.
The DHS doesn't rely on a corrupt government bureaucrat estimating GDP from a desk. It physically sends highly trained surveyors into actual physical homes.
But come on. You want me to believe a self-reported survey? People lie on surveys all the time.
Sure they do.
I lie on surveys. If someone knocks on a door and asks how much money a family makes, they're going to hide their cash.
You are absolutely right. People lie about their income. That is why the DHS doesn't ask about income.
Oh.
The DHS asks about assets. The surveyors physically observe the home. They ask, do you have a dirt floor or a cement floor? Do you own a radio? Does the household have a bicycle? You cannot easily lie to a surveyor standing in your living room about what your roof is made of. And critically, they ask for detailed historical employment data.
Like what?
Like, what exactly did you do for work today? What did you do 5 years ago?
Okay, that changes everything. You can't fake a cement floor.
Yeah.
1 million living rooms with cement floors don't lie.
Exactly. The researchers pulled raw, granular data from 24 different countries. They analyzed the detailed employment histories of 750,000 women.
And 250,000 men.
1 million specific documented human lives.
That is just an immense data set.
This massive microspecimen allowed them to completely bypass the governmental noise. It allowed them to correct absurd, almost comical official errors.
You mentioned absurd errors. Give me a concrete example. How bad were the official ledgers?
The official macro data in some countries was so disconnected from reality that the governments were officially classifying hundreds of thousands of subsistence farmers as military personnel.
Wait, what? They had farmers listed as soldiers.
Yes.
How does that even happen?
It happens when you use broken algorithms and outdated colonial-era classification codes to guess your labor force.
That is insane.
The official ledgers literally had phantom soldiers in the fields instead of farmers. That is how deeply broken the national accounts were. But the DHS survey bypasses the code. It asks the actual breathing person, what did you do for work today?
And the million voices answered. And they confirmed the exodus. They proved the shift to services was real, not a glitch. The macro illusion was permanently shattered by the micro reality.
But the microscope revealed something else. As they zoomed in on those million lives, they didn't just see one uniform trend. They saw rapid, violent polarization.
A shattering of the continent.
People constantly talk about Africa as if it is one homogenous thing, one unified economy with one single destiny.
There is no Africa. It is a geographical myth. It is 54 deeply distinct countries. And this data cleanly divides the continent into 4 rapidly diverging destinies.
4 completely different economic universes operating at the same time.
The researchers classified the continent into 4 distinct archetypes: resource-driven economies, mature, diversified economies, emerging economies, and pre-transition economies.
Let's ground this. Let's walk through 4 specific case studies and extremes to show how different these universes are.
Let's start with the first archetype, Mauritius.
Mauritius is the archetype of the mature, diversified economy. We call this the service sleep.
This island asks a fundamental economic question. Can you get rich without heavy industry? Can a nation prosper without ever building smokestacks and steel mills?
Mauritius proves the answer is a resounding yes. Between 2000 and 2007, something incredible happened there. Both their agriculture sector and their industrial sector shrank.
I want to get this straight. Manufacturing actually lost jobs.
Yeah.
They shed factory workers?
Yes. They actively shed manufacturing jobs. They shed farming jobs.
Wow.
And those workers weren't left unemployed. They were entirely absorbed by a hyper-efficient, modern service sector. We are talking about high-end finance, global tourism, and advanced telecommunications.
They skipped the dirty factory phase and vaulted straight into the 21st century. And they achieved high-efficiency prosperity, a true success story of the modern era.
But then you cross the continent to look at the dark reflection, the second archetype, Nigeria.
The oil shackles. This one is profoundly tragic.
Nigeria is a textbook resource-driven economy. This is a country drowning in black gold, billions upon billions of dollars pumping out of the ground and onto global markets every single year.
Right.
Yet on the street level, the labor market was totally paralyzed.
From 1999 to 2009, the labor shifts in Nigeria, that movement across the efficiency chasm, was virtually zero. A flat deadline.
The immense oil wealth entirely failed to translate into structural transformation. The oil sector generated astronomical cash, but it employed almost nobody.
Because you only need a few thousand highly skilled engineers to run an oil rig.
Exactly.
And because of the massive, suffocating informality in the rest of the economy, stepping off the farm in Nigeria gained you absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
The efficiency chasm didn't exist for the average guy. A guy hawking phone chargers in Lagos traffic wasn't making measurably more than a guy growing yams in the village.
Right.
The vast wealth of the nation was locked at the very top, these shackles of black gold.
Which is why we pivot to the third archetype, Uganda, the emerging economy, the shocking jump.
This is the one that gives you hope. An incredibly poor, landlocked nation that completely defied the odds and the expectations.
Uganda experienced a massive, almost violent restructuring of its labor force. A greater than 10 percentage point collapse in farming labor in a single decade.
People were sprinting away from agriculture, they were running from the fields. And where did they land?
They surged into high-efficiency, non-farm sectors, primarily services, but also a healthy chunk of manufacturing.
Okay.
The productivity gaps in Uganda were enormous. Manufacturing and services were vastly more efficient than farming. So when those workers physically moved from the village to Kampala, Uganda's overall macroeconomic engine got a massive roaring boost.
The jump worked. The desperate leap of faith paid off for millions of families.
But it doesn't always pay off. The leap can fail. Which brings us to the final archetype, Malawi, the pre-transition economy.
The mud struggle.
Why do some fail while neighbors succeed? Malawi faced the exact same global macroeconomic pressures as Uganda, the exact same demographic youth bulge.
Right.
But in Malawi, farm labor dropped by a pathetic 1.5% over the decade.
A rounding error. Meaningless.
A flatlining heartbeat of an economy. The service sector barely twitched. Manufacturing remained practically non-existent. The people were physically and economically trapped in the pre-transition mud.
I want you, the listener, to think about your own country right now. Think about your own industry or your own career path. Which economic trap or springboard do you resemble?
That's a great question.
Are you leaping forward into the digital service economy like Mauritius? Are you paralyzed by wealth, concentrated only at the top of your corporation like Nigeria?
Or are you making a shocking, desperate jump into a new field like Uganda?
Or are you stuck in the mud, doing the exact same thing your parents did, like Malawi? The macroeconomic sources are the same everywhere, but the human outcomes are wildly, violently different.
The outcomes depend entirely on the hidden drivers of the miracle. We have documented the exodus. We know millions of people physically moved. But why did they move?
What was the catalyst?
Exactly. What exact forces pushed them over the line in the dirt? Let's uncover the hidden drivers. And I want to start with a massive mystery, the counter-urbanization mystery.
Everyone from lay people to PhD economists assumes that urbanization means less farming. You pack your bags, you move to the concrete city, you stop growing crops. It's common sense.
But the DHS microdata delivers another brutal face slap to common sense.
It is totally counterintuitive.
The data showed that while rural farming plummeted, urban farming actually saw a slight statistically significant rise.
Wait, urban farming rose. People moved to congested cities to become farmers. That makes zero sense. Where do you plant crops in a slum?
They didn't move to the city to farm, the city moved to them.
Oh, I see.
The urban centers in Africa are growing at such a terrifyingly fast velocity, they are physically swallowing the surrounding agriculture. The municipal boundaries are expanding outward so violently that they are incorporating surrounding villages and farmlands.
The city is literally eating the countryside.
Yeah.
So a guy who has lived on the same rural farm for 40 years suddenly becomes an urban farmer on a government census without ever moving his bed.
Exactly. But that statistical quirk is only part of the migration story. The larger, darker driver of the movement is land suffocation.
This is the brutal, unforgiving reality of the miracle. Did these millions of young men jump toward shiny new opportunities in the city, or were they pushed off a cliff?
They were pushed hard.
They didn't leave because they wanted a glamorous life in the capital. They left because they were physically suffocating.
The continent experienced a massive, unprecedented population explosion. Rural population growth rates skyrocketed, and the cruel math of agriculture is simple. What happens when a village population doubles, but the arable land stays the exact same size?
Per capita farmland radically shrinks. The plots get sliced thinner and thinner.
A father has a small 2-acre plot. He has 4 sons. He divides his plot into 4 half-acre plots. Those sons grow up and have 4 children each.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the land cannot physically produce enough calories to keep the human bodies living on it alive.
It physically suffocated the youth. The soil was exhausted. The land could not feed them. Young men especially didn't just casually seek the bright lights of the city. They fled rural areas purely to survive.
It was an evacuation, a desperate, chaotic escape from starvation.
Demographics pushed them out the door.
Yeah.
But institutions are what allowed them to land safely on the other side. We have to talk about the institutional dividend.
This is my favorite concept in the entire paper. What is the literal, calculable cash value of peace? What is the economic return on investment of humans simply not killing each other?
The return is astronomical. The researchers charted 2 crossing lines that explain everything. By the late 2000s, the frequency of major civil wars in sub-Saharan Africa was half of what it was in the mid-90s.
Systemic violence dropped by 50%. The warlords lost power.
And simultaneously, they looked at the Polity 4 Index. This is a global metric that measures the quality of democracy, civil liberties, and governance. That index surged upward across the continent.
The machine guns went quiet. The ballot boxes were brought out.
Peace allowed human bodies and financial capital to freely flow. You cannot have a massive spatial reorganization of labor if there are warlords blocking the highways with checkpoints.
No, you
You
can't.
cannot move to a high-efficiency service job if the capital city is under artillery siege. Peace lubricated the gears of the economic miracle.
Peace isn't just a moral good. Peace is physical infrastructure. Peace is a supply chain.
And that realization leads directly to the ultimate catalyst, the governance multiplier.
Because commodity prices were booming everywhere in the developing world during this period, oil, copper, rare earth minerals, global prices went through the roof, driven by China's hunger for material.
But not everyone got rich.
Exactly right. High commodity prices alone do not create an economic miracle. High prices are just a match. Governance is the fuel. If you don't have the fuel, the match just burns your fingers.
Break down this multiplier effect. How does it actually work on the ground?
The data reveals a very clear, ruthless equation. High commodity prices plus bad governance equals tragedy. It equals hypercorruption, extreme inequality, and very often a relapse into civil war. The windfall money just funds the warlords and the corrupt elite.
That's the Nigeria model we talked about, the oil shackles. The money goes from the offshore rig straight into a Swiss bank account. The guy on the street never sees a dime.
But high commodity prices plus good governance equals the miracle. The data shows that only in countries with good governance did the global commodity boom translate into physical structural shifts.
Like what?
It translated into women leaving the fields because they had access to microloans. It translated into youth getting an education instead of farming. The government took the windfall tax revenues from the copper mines and built actual schools. They paved actual roads.
They created the environment that allowed the labor force to transition.
Bad governance hoards the boom. Good governance distributes the boom. It is a magic multiplier.
It is the absolute difference between a resource curse and an economic blessing.
This brings us to the final, most critical section of our deep dive, the outro. We've seen the miracle. We've decoded the numbers. We know the poverty drop was real.
But we have to slow the pace here. We have to look at the horizon and ask the terrifying question. Is this new reality a mirage? Or is it a permanent miracle?
It is what McMillan and Harttgen call the unfinished challenge.
The service boom is incredible. We see the numbers. Telecommunications, retail banking, mobile money, transportation. It literally lifted tens of millions of people out of extreme poverty. But is this entire new economy a castle built on sand?
The researchers drop a very heavy truth at the very end of their paper. You cannot sustain a continent's efficiency growth purely on low-end services forever, not at this stage of human development.
Services are great for a quick leap, but you can only have so many people selling prepaid phone cards to each other. You can only have so many people driving motorcycle taxis. At some point, the productivity gains in these low-end informal services hit a hard concrete ceiling.
Africa missed the first major factory wave. They skipped the Industrial Revolution that built the modern wealth of East Asia. But a massive, unprecedented window of opportunity is opening right now as we speak.
Because China's labor costs are rising rapidly, the workshop of the world is getting too expensive to maintain. Those low-wage manufacturing jobs, the textile mills, the basic electronics assembly, they are going to move. They have to move to survive.
And Africa is perfectly positioned to capture them. They have rising agricultural productivity to feed the cities, vastly better governance than they had in the 90s, and a massive, young, hungry labor force.
The global chessboard is being reset. The pieces are in motion.
But they have to seize those factories, because historical data shows us that economic growth without industrialization usually ends in a middle-income trap.
Which brings us to a terrifying yet thrilling final thought for you, the listener. The data proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the African growth miracle was real. It was not a statistical error from a broken ledger.
It was not a fluke.
It was tens of millions of human beings making a rational, desperate, and highly successful jump across the efficiency chasm. But history is deeply unforgiving. If Africa's millions of young people, who are right now holding smartphones instead of hoes, do not find high-productivity manufacturing jobs in the next decade, what happens to that immense pent-up human energy?
It cannot just dissipate into the air. Energy like that will either build something incredible or it will combust.
Does that energy build the next great global superpower? A continent that dominates the 21st century the way Asia dominated the end of the 20th? Or does it become the greatest demographic pressure cooker in human history? Millions of educated, connected youth sitting in massive cities with no factories to build in.
Think about that immense human energy.
Think about the invisible line in the dirt. Think about the arrogant autopsy that was entirely embarrassingly wrong. Think about that the next time you check the made-in label on the collar of your clothes.
The narrative of the global economy is never finished.
Question the official ledgers. Question the accepted common-sense wisdom. The real story is almost always hiding in the living rooms. I'm digging deeper.